This conference will now be recorded.
Well, good morning and welcome to the Let's Talk Business show with myself, the Empress of Biz, and the Duke of Business, Sal Acosta. I'm JoAnn Forrester. I am an entrepreneur with over 35 years experience, and I was 5 when I started Guide. Just remember that. And we are going to be talking today with a gentleman who is a serial entrepreneur who has 10 years of experience in multiple business ownership and been a guest of Sal at one of his networking events. And good morning and welcome to Geoff Skadra. Skadra, right?
Yeah, Skadra.
Skadra.
Hi.
Okay. Welcome. And
Thank you.
Sal, how did you meet our guest, Geoff?
Well, as I was mentioning before we actually formally started the interview, I'm here in St. Clairsville, Ohio, which is right across the river from Wheeling. And a couple of years ago, I was working with a business owner that required some help with digital marketing. It was the same thing as always. He was very good in what he did. But being older than me, he was a little bit lost when it came to digital marketing. And at that point, Geoff was with Omni Strategic Technologies in Wheeling. So we decided to go out there and see if we could hook him up with some digital marketing. And that's how I met Geoff. And been in contact after that and worked on a couple of different things. And especially now that he's got his consulting practice that we'll talk about. And like you said, he was my guest as guest speaker last Monday at the business networking lunch that I do. And based on that, I thought it'd be great to bring him here and interview him and record this for the benefit of everybody that couldn't attend that meeting.
Geoff, you've been in business how many years now?
I've been an entrepreneur for the better part of 10 years now. I've had my consulting practice for almost 2 years. Prior to that, I owned a digital marketing agency, in which Sal was referring to Omni Strategic Technologies. I owned the digital marketing agency for approximately 6 or 7 years, and which time Omni acquired my business, and I went to work for them for a few years. And then we separated ways there, and I started this consulting business, Focus First Business Advisors.
Hey, Geoff, before we get too much into what you're currently doing now, which I think is very interesting, because I'm a business broker, I always ask people this question when they do transactions on their own. Could you briefly describe first how sort of the matchmaking was made? Meaning that did they discover you? Did you discover them? Was it the result of working together on something? How did you even find out that you both existed and that made some benefit to doing the merger or the acquisition? And then two, along with that, how did you guys agree on a price or evaluation?
Yeah, so it kind of just sort of happened naturally. I wasn't really looking to exit my business. I don't know if they were 100% looking to acquire my business, but Omni Strategic Technologies, their business model had been to acquire other businesses. They had previously acquired a web business in Charleston, a transcription business, an IT business, and were conglomerating, all these businesses together. And so really just naturally, I had been going out and connecting with people and trying to network and get business, and came across Omni and John Riesbeck, and met with him and kind of told him what I was doing with digital marketing. It was a little bit different than anybody in this valley at the time was doing, and they just kind of clicked and became they became interested in my business. We sat down several times, and the reason that it interested me was because they were bringing me to the table, not just to go work for them, but to help grow their company as well, to sit at the table and to build a business that was bigger, providing more value to its clients than just IT or just marketing or just web, but something bigger. And that's what appealed to me and why I gave up, working for myself and went to work for somebody else. And the way the transaction happened wasn't very formal. I definitely learned lessons in what to do and what not to do, and and I didn't know Sal at the time, unfortunately. Otherwise, I definitely would have got him involved. But no, they just we evaluated assets, evaluated skill, talent, and so it was a combination of probably a little bit different, but it's a combination of like an incentive package, which is sort of like paying me on the back end, right? So in the first year, second year, and third year, what I would get paid in addition to a salary, based on a little bit based on performance, but also based on what I already existing was bringing to the table that was already going, the book of business that was already going to bring in business for them. And then a purchase price as well. They bought the assets from me. They gave me the salary. So kind of that combination of things, bringing in some of my employees as well, in order to save their jobs and not have to, let everybody go. So that was kind of the long and short of it. Don't want to get too bogged down in those details.
I just want to know, how many employees did you have at the time that you did this acquisition merger?
I was up to 6 employees, and right before the merger acquisition, I just had to lay somebody off due to performance, and so we were down to 5, and we carried over 3 into Omni. And we didn't carry all because there were duplicate roles at the business already.
Sal, do you have any more questions?
No, that's it. If you want to talk a little bit about JoAnn, maybe talk a little bit about what he's involved with right now. I think that might be interesting for people to learn about that.
Yeah. I do have to ask one question. You hear the term digital marketing all the time. What exactly is it?
Yeah, so it actually does not have a very specific definition. It can mean different things. So digital marketing can mean anything from like search engine optimization to Facebook marketing to social media marketing or advertising. It can mean strictly advertising. It can mean strictly digital advertising. It's referred to as. But in my mind, what we did was kind of a little bit of everything. We did anything that was digital, anything that had to do with promoting your business online. Was digital marketing to us, and that was web, and that was Facebook advertising and social media management and content marketing. All of these pieces that kind of drove business in, and so I guess what I found was that through all of that, and I guess a good segue into what I'm doing now is along the way I realized there was a need for businesses to have better foundations, to have better messaging, to be smarter about how they're doing business. And what I found was they would always come to me because they thought that more marketing and more sales was the answer. And then sometimes it is, but it's not the only answer. It's more about building a better foundation, having the right mindset and having the right systems in place as well.
When you talk about,
let me ask you this: that pivot that you did, I'll call it a pivot, from maybe the sort of traditional digital marketing, sort of technology focused, to more of a general sort of business advisor, business coach. I'm interpreting that it was more a pull from the market, people asking you for this, than you saying, "Oh, you know what? There's a need for this, so I'll start providing it."
Correct. There is a need. There is a niche there that once I started talking with people, there was always strategic problems that seemed to be needing solved, and I would usually it was centered around digital marketing, but I would build strategic plans around their marketing, right? So they would come to me with a need and say, hey, we want to promote XYZ. And I'd say, okay, great, but let's kind of work backwards and let's start at the start and figure out all the basics. Who are you targeting? Why are you doing this? What are you trying to profit? What are all these pieces in place that need to happen in order for us to be successful to market you on Facebook, in content and all these other things. You can't just go out and spew a bunch of stuff out there into the world and hope it sticks. But yeah, that's kind of the where it was. And it also spawns back to my own personal story of that business. And so that digital marketing agency was really my first venture. And how it all started was kind of jumping back a little ways. I started in graphic design and marketing in-house for a few different companies, and I would get freelance projects along the way. It's just kind of this natural thing. Everybody, all these businesses you see, they all want brochures, they want logos, they want all these things, and so that just grew. It just grew and grew and kept stacking and stacking and stacking, and so I didn't really know anything about business. At that time I hadn't had any formal training. I was just learning it as I went, but I was, kept growing. I kept growing year after year, year after year. They kept being a need, and I was doing it all myself, right? I was the expert at the time, and I had to figure out how to take that talent that I had and get other people involved and pass along that information, pass along, the tasks. And what ended up happening is just, it's where I found the big A word, which was anxiety. You get all of this coming at you, and now I got to figure out how to run a business. I got to figure out how to do cash flow. I got to figure out financials and financial statements and QuickBooks and all the pieces that go into working on your business. But at the same time, I was working in my business too, and it just got too much. I had to figure something out, and what I actually ended up hiring a coach, and the coach really, was a big turning point in my life and helped me understand where I needed to go and how I needed to grow my business and how to focus my time and energy on the right things to really scale my business. And from that point on, that was kind of the turning point that led me to really, wanting to help other businesses not be in that situation. I wanted to help them. I knew there was a better way. I knew there was a faster, simpler methods to business. At the time, I was just, grasping for anything and trying new programs and putting money into training and all this other stuff and just going around and around and around and never really, getting ahead. So that's been my driving force now in creating Focus First, is really helping these business owners to get out of that rut or even avoid it altogether.
The anxiety word. I love it.
Yeah. Overwhelm, anxiety, stress, the big A.
There are friends that at times, one time I owned 5 companies and was partner in 5 companies. I was insane enough to do that. We'd talk at 3 o'clock in the morning. Someone's, that someone in that whole team is awake. That was one of the good things about opening. Now, how are we going to make payroll? That type of thing. Or my husband is not talking to me because, those type of things. What's the big difference from your viewpoint, because you work for yourself and you work for other people? What's the big point, big thing that you've noticed of working for yourself or working for others?
What have I noticed is good or bad?
Both.
Both. What's that?
Or different.
Or different. Well, I like setting my own path for myself. That's it's probably a little bit of a control thing. I like to set my own destiny and be in control of what happens. So that's probably why I gravitate towards doing my own thing. But I guess what I found in all the years of working for other people, and as far as business standpoints related, is that kind of a universal theme that I see is that not really, even bigger businesses don't always focus on the systems and the processes. And especially in the area that the type of businesses that I specialize in, when I worked at, I'm not trying to call Omni out by any means, but, they were, again, kind of a victim of their own success. They merged and got, acquired other businesses, and they grew and they added employees. And so you had all these mix of different cultures, never really took the time to say, okay, this is how we're going to do it. This is how Omni's going to do it. We're going to mix all the best things, all the best systems. And even before that, working for some bigger companies in the past, kind of the same thing. You just didn't see that there was that level of organization that you knew if you could overcome it, that everything would get streamlined. Everything would, I'm not saying that it fixes every problem, and everything's, a perfect world and we all live in harmony in a business, because there's always something that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But it helps a lot. I used the example the other day at the talk with Sal. I said, onboarding is a thing. Businesses, they pretty much, it's easy to nail the HR onboarding, but there's a lot of things that an employee needs to know, and systems and how to do things. That's more than just HR. It's more than just, I got my benefits figured out and I got these things. It took me a good 6 months to a year to really understand how, as a director in that business, of how to operate effectively. And I was just essentially figuring it out on my own, even though I was part of a larger company, and that just was inefficient, and took me a lot longer to get up to speed.
Hey, Geoff, let me ask you this, because I know you work with a lot of small companies, and JoAnn and I have done the same. Do you think there's almost like a self-selection skew to where the owners of these small companies are very, and when I say disorganized, but I say disorganized because, they're creative, they're adventurous, they're risk takers, as opposed to, for example, I've also had the opportunity to work with much bigger professional, Fortune 500 companies where it's a lot of professionals. They're more sort of managers. Maybe they're academically trained to be managers, so they're much more systemic thinkers. They're much more organized. So, do you see that as an actual skew? And then how difficult is it, and what technique do you use to tell these entrepreneurs that have been very successful to a certain level, hey, listen, you've been successful up to now following this sort of strategy, but to take it to the next level, right, you're really going to have to be a little more systemic of a thinker, a little more strategic, a little more organized. And I know part of that discussion also, by the way, at some point goes to the founder has to leave or take a different role and maybe bring in a professional CEO, whatever. So how do you deal with all that?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, and that's the exact type of owner that I work with. Is that owner who had a great idea? They've been successful over the first few years of their business, but what's gotten them to that point, which you could call hustle and grind, right? It's just like my story, right? I was really good at design, really good at marketing. I knew a lot. I know everything about graphic design and marketing. But what got me there, what gets any business owner to that point, who's got that talent and gets that customer base, like you said, isn't going to take them to the next step. It can't. It's gonna, that's where that big A word comes into play. You're all of a sudden overwhelmed and anxiety and, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? But so what the solution is, what it starts with, what I believe is in what I call the scaling mindset. And essentially it's, they need to be able to fire themselves, right? They got to get over themselves. They are their own biggest roadblock, really, when it comes to their business. And a lot of times it's because they don't want to give up control. They're worried about, upsetting the status quo and cash flow. If, these limiting beliefs behind, if I trust somebody else, they're going to screw it all up. I can do it better. And so why don't I just keep doing it myself? Well, the reason why you don't is because you're just going to stay on that edge, right? So an analogy that I use is, you've gotten on that journey, that entrepreneurial journey. You've done really well, right? You're walking along. There's not a lot of resistance. Well, all of a sudden, you've hit a point where there's a chasm, right? There's a cliff. At the bottom of that cliff, there's probably hot coals and spikes and all these other things. And if you keep walking in the same direction you're walking and doing the same thing, you're going to fall off in the cliff, right? Or you can choose to stay right there on the edge of the cliff and just be happy with your level of anxiety and not really ever do anything more. Or you can figure out how to get to the other side and build that bridge and do everything that you take to build that bridge. And so to answer your question is there's a step-by-step process that you got to take to simplify it, because otherwise it just feels overwhelming. It just feels like you're adding more overwhelm. If you tell somebody and you go in and say, yeah, well, you have to hire a manager, or you have to take these roles and replace them. You have to put these systems in place. You have to have a strategy. You have to have all these things. If you throw all that stuff at them, they're just going to back away and say, there's no way I can do that. So for me, it really starts with the mindset of helping them understand these things. Yes, you can think bigger. No, you shouldn't have a limiting mindset. You shouldn't think that, like the business that I used for an example in my talk, 1042 Tactical, he kept thinking, oh, I'll just be in West Virginia. I don't want to be any bigger than that. Well, working with him showed him, look, you can take this success. If we create this sales system and it's a success, he does outside sales, he's retail, and we can be successful in West Virginia. There's no reason why we can't take that, transplant it into another place, into another place, and another place. And so we have successfully hired a salesperson in Massachusetts in the New England area who's going to cover 3 or 4 states up in there. And we've just been talking with someone in Ohio who's going to cover Ohio and a little bit west of there as well. So, now we're just scaling. We figured out the steps. We covered his mindset. We built a strategy for him so he could see the steps. You can't achieve it if you can't see it. So we built out these steps so he can see exactly how to get there. And we knocked out one step at a time, one system at a time, just maintained a very simple approach. And now he's in a position where, he's starting to see explosive growth.
Let me ask this question. Developing the steps, scaling it up. People, you can't see it. You can't achieve it. How do you deal with the money issue? Because that's what I deal with a lot. Is a lot of times my clients, they're in the midst of growth, and what surprises them the most is how much money that takes, and that we're in problems because we don't have enough money. And my job is to get them enough money, but to also be able to show to the bank the money guy.
Yeah.
This business is worth investing. How do you deal with that issue?
So, every business is a little bit different. The ones that I've dealt with, typically, what I try to do is understand, making sure they have they're focused down on the right product, figure out where their success has been, make sure there's no waste or inefficiency, so that potentially we can find more profit by doubling down on what's worked with them in the past. Put all of their energy into the things that are going to have the biggest impact the fastest. So if part of the plan is, okay, we're going to get to this point and we need to invest, find an investor for $500,000 or $1 million. What do we need to do to get there in order to attract that or prove to the bank, what this looks like. And a distillery, for example, is another client that I worked with this past year. And they, one of the things analysis that we worked on was we broke down all their products. Let's look at everything they're selling. Let's look at all their profit margins. Let's break down all the data and see how you're selling it, what you're selling it, or who you're selling it to. And what we did was we found that, we could take certain products, and if we pushed and got the right message and the right marketing behind those products that had the highest margins, that they could increase their profit for the next year by, they weren't a huge company, but they could increase their profit by almost $100,000. And in addition to that, found them another $50,000 in money they were wasting in their material costs. And so right there, there's a potential, over the course of 6 months, that they could start to, pull some of that money out, and actually not even need an investor if they really wanted to, or they could put it towards, a down payment or something if they wanted bank financing. So those are little things that I try to do, or really just try to take a holistic look at their business and try to, I've always been kind of a data guy and analysis person. So from the start of working with someone, I look at everything from their finances to their numbers. If their numbers aren't a lot of times aren't even there or aren't in order, getting it in order first and foremost, so I can make good guesses, not guesses, but make decisions, educated decisions around where we need to go. And so for me, with any business, it always comes to organization first. If you're not organized and you don't have things, the right strategy, the right mindset, and the right systems, then why try to grow anyway? Because you're just going to cause a bunch of problems to begin with. But if you're really organized and you know exactly where you're trying to get to, then getting more money you should be able to prove to investors that you have a solid business, and this is why.
Now, Geoff, let me ask you something, because you just hit on a point that is very near and dear to my heart, and I'm sure JoAnn has seen the same probably more times than she wants to have seen it. But a lot of times I'll have a client come to me and say, hey, I want to sell my business. Okay, great. But the accounting is there, the record keeping is not there, the financials, everything's a mess. So because you deal again with a lot of small businesses, can you, without naming specific names, but just kind of describe the most difficult situation, the most frustrating situation, the hardest time that you had, and were you able to turn it around into a success, or was it just one of these where you went, hey, look, I tried to help you, but I can't, and I wish you good luck?
Yeah, I can actually. So
we all have them. It happens.
The business, they basically had nothing. They weren't really doing any accounting. They certainly had no KPIs. They weren't tracking any key performance indicators. They sold inventory, and used a point of sale system, but didn't have any of their inventory in it. It was just numbers, right? Numbers going into the system and money going into the bank. And that's how they were running the business, right? Here's the money coming in. Most basic way you can run a business. Here's the money coming in. Here's what we got to pay out. And it was just, and that was just the tip of it, right? I mean, that just said there was no organization to anything. We're going to hire whoever we want. We're not going to have any records of anything. And so it was tough, right? I mean, it's overwhelming for me to come into a business like that where there's nothing, right? So now I have to start from basically square one. And this is a business that had been in business for almost 3 years, so they've found a way to make it successful. I guess you could call it successful, right? But the problem was they weren't pulling a lot of profit. They weren't doing much with profit, and that's why. So getting those numbers in order, the very simple basic stuff, making sure the accountant had what he needed, getting QuickBooks in place, understanding where their sales were going, what was where the sales were driven in from, and then focusing efforts that way. So yeah, I mean, we were able to turn it around successfully. On the flip side, working with that distillery, like they were all on top of everything. They handed me everything and was like, here you go. And I'm like, nice. Like I can just start looking at it and analyzing it. I showed them a few things. They were doing kind of the basic number stuff and help them understand some other KPIs like lifetime value of a customer, cost of acquisition for customers, these things that can really add to their understanding of how to get more customers and how to add more profit. So those are two kind of quick examples.
Yeah, I had a plumber, a very successful plumber, that ran into problems too. You're talking $1 million plus. Brought in everything in shoe boxes.
Oh.
I just sat there.
I know
my secretary and I, we spent 2 weeks organizing those receipts in proper categories so we could make sense. And this guy, he says, well, I come in, I bring in money, I send that cruise. And,
yeah.
My sympathy.
Yeah, it's well, you look at that and you're like, what are we missing? What are the possibilities? Like, look what you could be doing. My goodness, you just have a little organization. And that's, my approach is not trying to. So in that case, like I came in and said, okay, I'm not going to ask you to do this. Like, we have the money's there. We're going to hire someone to get this in order for you, right? My focus is always trying to make sure I'm not adding more onto the business owner if I can help it, right? I want them to own the business and not I have to operate the business, or at least if they want to operate the business, they focus in the areas that they love the most and that they're most passionate about. So if I can achieve that, I find that to be, and make the money along the way, then that's a success for me.
I find that they, what they love to do, they concentrate on, and they may not even charge enough for that.
Yeah.
And what they hate to do, they either let it go or they charge a lot of money, and that's the area where they're making money.
Yeah, and I was probably guilty of that too. I think a lot of people are, that you're doing what you love if you would be willing to do it for free, right? But it's not always the best business practice if you're trying to build a business and grow a business. But ultimately,
go ahead. Sal, do you have any questions?
What's that?
Sal, do you have any questions?
Yeah, let me ask you this. I don't know if you've seen this and what your take on this is, and it goes a little bit to what we were just talking about, relative to pricing your product, because again, even though I'm not an advisor, but every once in a while I run into a situation where the guy is, like you said, overwhelmed, anxiety. He has more business than he can handle, or he wants to handle, maybe doesn't want to grow, doesn't want to hire employees. Okay, fine. And I always ask him the question, well, why don't you raise your prices? And, the old supply demand thing, not go crazy, but raise it to the point where now your orders coming in match your capabilities, your interest, your capacity, whatever. And 9 times out of 10, I get the reply of, oh, no, you can't do that. And it's almost this mentality of, I'm charging $9.99 for my product, and I've got more orders than I can handle. But if I charge $10, then we go off the cliff and I have no orders at all. So have you seen that? Have you been able to work with that? I mean, what is your thought on all that?
Yeah, a little bit. And I've heard stories of people doing it as well. And it comes back to a mindset and a belief that somebody's not going to pay for value, right? And I think 9 times out of 10, if somebody understands the value and they understand why paying more for that is better. I have a photographer friend, and this is one of the stories that I know about somebody who did this. A photographer friend of mine who I used all the time when I had my business, but he charged $200 an hour, and especially in this area, photography at $200 an hour is a high price point. Most people were charging probably in the 100, no more than 150, and even if you went into Pittsburgh, probably the best of the best were doing $200 an hour. And what he told me was kind of a similar thing, right? He was getting business, and someone suggested to him, why not raise your price, right? And so he was a little nervous to do that, but what he found was he lost some customers, but other customers went ahead and paid that amount. And so he was making about the same amount, maybe even a little more, but working less.
Yeah.
Okay. And so he had a better quality of life, and he stuck with it. And what I found from working with him is that he was really good at being a creative director, right? So he was a photographer you could send to a job, and I wouldn't have to go be a creative director because I knew he would handle it. And for me, that was by and large worth $200 an hour, and he wasn't charging me anything on the back end for extras and this, that, and the other. It was just straight $200 an hour. I said, people seem to get scared about that, but once you understood the value of what you're getting, and if you can communicate the value of what you're getting, I think people will pay for value all day long.
I found that out, and we developed pricing software. And once they understand how the pricing connects to their anxiety level, it was amazing how they started to make mindset adjustments.
Right. Yeah, and I would advocate to test it too. I mean, do half and half. Charge some to some and some to the other, as long as word's not going to get out. But see what happens.
Geoff, what is the best way to get a hold of you?
The best way to get a hold of me, you can log on to my website, focusfirstadvisors.com. We do assessments for businesses. So if you're unsure if you can scale your business or grow your business, we do a free assessment for you, and we'll walk you through that assessment and give you a clear picture of how to move forward, what are the best steps for you to move forward, and what you need to do in order to scale your business. Can also reach me directly through email, geoff@focusfirstadvisors.com.
Repeat both of those, the website and your email, please.
What's that?
Repeat both of those, your website and your email again.
Repeat them?
Yeah.
Sure. Website, focusfirstadvisors.com. And the email is geoff@focusfirstadvisors.com. Also LinkedIn, and we have a Facebook page as well.
Okay. Sal, I'm coming back to you for a wrap-up question, and what I want you to think of is, if you had a magic wand, what is the one thing you would like to give to entrepreneurs? Okay. Sal, what is the best way to contact you? And then, first of all, that.
Well, very simple. You can call me right on my cell phone, area code 484-358-9470. Again, 484-358-9470. Or you can email me, Sal, SAL459 @yahoo.com, Sal459 @yahoo.com.
Okay. And when is your next next networking meeting?
It is Monday, February the 10th. We always do them at the same place, which is Kennan's Chop House on Main Street in the South Point area of Canonsburg. And we start at 12 noon and have lunch and always have a guest speaker, and everybody that's in attendance gets the opportunity to introduce themselves to the rest of the group, say what their product or service is, and usually at the end we have time for just general conversation, and or people can stay behind too.
Okay. And if you had a magic wand, what would you want to give to entrepreneurs?
Well, I am still, believe it or not, celebrating the new year, even though we're 2 weeks into it, and
Yeah.
still wrestling with my New Year's resolution. So if I had a magic wand, I would want to give everybody an incredibly successful 2020 from the perspective of business, because I know we have a lot of people that are business owners or small business owners, from a personal perspective, which is also very important, and of course, a lot of health in 2020.
Same here. Jeff, you had that wonderful magic wand. I've just given it to you. What would you want to give to business owners?
I would want to give them more financial freedom and time freedom to do what they want when they want, and not be tied down to their business.
And a good reason to hire you.
Exactly.
Yes. And I would, yeah, I would want to give them, first of all, besides good health, because that's so important,
Yes.
humor.
Mm.
The ability to step back and get out of your own ego and laugh at yourself. Because if you can laugh at yourself and then apologize, it's amazing what can get done. So that's what I would do. Is there anything else you'd like to say, Jeff, before we wrap up?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just plug a few events as well. I believe on February 10th also, in the morning, though, it's not conflicting with Sal's event. Right now it's on February 10th, is the kickoff of a 5-part series that I'll be conducting through the St. Clairsville Chamber. It'll happen every 2 weeks after that. And on March 11th in Steubenville at the EGCC, Eastern Gateway Community College, there's a new conference called the Ohio Valley Business Conference, and it is on March 11th, and it runs all day. I'll be the keynote speaker for that conference.
Will you have that posted on your website?
I will, probably Facebook primarily. I'll be promoting that out here shortly.
Okay, your Facebook, what's that underneath? Because I want to friend you.
Focus First Advisors.
Okay, so it's under your company. So
Correct.
anything else you want to add you're doing?
No, but I will ask one last question of Jeff, and then we'll do the final wrap up here. I know from some of the terminology that you've used, some of it refers to a book that's called, I think, The E-Myth Revisited. I'm going from memory. I know from prior conversations you're also a big fan of Jim Collins. So for people that have a little bit of time to read, which should be everybody, very successful people read a lot, but could you recommend 2 or 3 books that people that are listening could read in 2020?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Jim Collins, Good to Great. That's always a good one. He analyzes 28 companies over 5 years of these larger companies, what took them from nothing to, this high level of business. And there's a lot of lessons in there that even small businesses can own, or can take away from that. One of the books right now I'm reading is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Which is a classic entrepreneur book. And I always tell people that I love it because it's even though it got this process of how all these successful business magnates of the time, back in the early 1900s grew. It's not all about getting rich; it's how to achieve and those things. And I love the process in there that it teaches. Other than that, those are kind of the ones I'm focused on right now, or have been. And darn it, there was another one I just came across, but I can't. It's not coming back up to mind right now.
Well, if you remember it, let me know. I'll put it on the description of the video.
Absolutely.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you for your time. And as always, a good conversation. And since it's still the big celebrating New Year's, I wish you both, first of all, good health and then prosperity and enjoying it.
Absolutely. Thank you. And you too, JoAnn.
Thank you.
Thank you.